Rick Venturi's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Rick, I wish you were out here. You've been out here at these events with me before. Now they've been closer to where you live, but I wish you were out here with me. Right? We have so much to discuss. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. All right. The major topic, Rick, today was that the right call? Was that a good call by Frank Reich on 4th and 4 at the end of the overtime yesterday against Houston that led to the field goal and a loss? What, in your estimation, was the right call?
Okay, first of all, without question, and I've been a fan of Frank. I wanted Frank to have the job. I think he's done a terrific job with the offense. I think he's limited beyond belief. And then when he loses Hilton in the middle of the game, he's still able to come down and, this team could be 3-0-1. And that's not even with a stretch. And so I give him a lot of credit. I'm definitely a fan of Frank Reich. I'm not a fan of the call. I'm not a fan of the decision. Basically everybody's talking today like it's a binary choice, but it's really a three-pronged choice. And, I love the courage. I love the guts, but you really get paid to make the right decision, not the courageous decision. Now, this will be a little bit unpopular because I know the local wave is to say, oh my God, this is showing guts and all this and all that, and that this year doesn't matter, which we'll get into. But it was a tremendous risk at the 43-yard line. Tremendous risk. The percentages of you scoring aren't very good. And the risk of giving that ball there and literally handing them a win, especially when you're in a situation where you're almost down to nothing offensively, to me, is just very, very difficult to do. Is it the worst decision in the history of football? No, I'm not going to say that. There would be reasons to do it. I wouldn't do it. As I said, it's not a binary choice. I look at it this way. Winning is tremendous. Ties are okay, and losing is awful. And so, a tie is a hell of a lot better than a loss. And I know a lot of people that have never been in the arena are saying, "Oh, I don't do ties." What do you mean you don't do ties on Madden? I mean, what do you do? You don't even understand it, in that sense. And the players are going to back him. I mean, there's no player not going to back his coach. And basically we have a chemistry on that team. We got a lot of Brady Bunch guys. I mean, we got guys that are gonna go along regardless. They're lucky just to be on the route. The other thing that I think the thing that also stilted me a little bit is I didn't like the process. First of all, if you're that firm that you're going to go for it on 4th and 4 on your own 43, and man, we are going to go 10 out of 10 times. We're going to do this. If you're that firm, then don't go out there and do the fake cadence, okay? Don't do that, because you did two things. One, you allowed the Texans to get a blow, and two, you took a timeout. If you were going to go after them and do it and you were so firm in it, get right up on the ball on 4th down and go after them, okay? Go after them, because if you make it, then you take a timeout and you still have one left. And you still got to get about 17 yards to make it to, even though Vinny is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, and congratulations to him after yesterday for validating what we've known forever, that he's the best of all times. But yesterday, it's undisputed. It can't even be argued. But you would have had another timeout. Let's say you complete a ball, you have one more, because you're down, you're inside of 20 seconds, period. So, I mean, that's very difficult. And then the third thing is, again, like I did the last two plays of the Philadelphia game, as good as the offense is and as much as he's created, at the end of the day, it's players, not plays. And we basically run a one-on-one pattern to Rodgers, who's really a slot. We got Rodgers on one side. We got Grant on the other side. They get up on press in 4th and 4 like you expect, and we just really get stuffed. Now, it is not a great throw, but, I mean, what you're doing when you're in that situation and you got a guy pressing and he's sitting right on top of the defensive back who's coming back to you, you're going to try to throw it low, but you want to throw it low and away, and you want to fire it. And I don't think he necessarily fired it, but you are going to throw that ball low. You're not going to throw it high because he can strip it. And, you're dealing with a lot of small receivers here. Even if you're going to throw a jump ball, throw it to Ebron maybe. But, to me, on 4th and 4, knowing that you don't have Hilton in the game, if Hilton's out there, it's a different story. Joseph is scared to death of Hilton. Every single game we play, Hilton ruins him, and he was ruining him and they were playing a lot of soft zone, and Hilton was just ruining him. So now, if Hilton's in the game, that becomes a good call because you got a chance to win that one-on-one, but you're not giving yourself a high percentage. I would have much rather seen some type of stack, one of their rubs where they go cross patterns and stuff like that and rub people coming out of there, knowing that you're going to get man-to-man coverage, or run a quick option to the outside. They were packing it in pretty good. But, at some point, get in a stack where you've got two guys and they have to make a decision and they're not pressing you all the way out there. So, I just, like I said, it's not maybe the worst call in the world, and it's, obviously it's a very popular call, but at the end of the day, you're 1-3. And, in terms of winning the locker room, I've never understood that because you'll win the locker room about as long as it takes for them to look at the standings here in a couple days. I mean,
well, Rick, he already had the locker room.
Nobody won the locker room more than Chuck Pagano. Chuck Pagano owned the locker room. For whatever you want to be critical of him, he owned the locker room for 5.5 years. And the reason that he lost the locker room, if he did, was only because the losses mounted up, and that's what it is in the NFL. It's basically winning and losing over time. So, I've never bought into that totally, and I've never bought into, well, this is a lost year. I mean, who the hell? See, that's a self-proclaimed, narrative that our management has gone out and made sure that everybody believes that, that basically we have some arbitrary rebuilding program that might take forever and ever and ever. And what it does when you look at things that way, and then the media buys into that, and all of a sudden this is a learning experience. This isn't a developmental league. I mean, basically, I said to you in the beginning of the season, when you start the year, they give everybody an 8-8. You make it 11-5 and 5-11. I mean, this team could be 3-0-1 as we talk here, without much effort at all. And, basically, to me, when you set this rebuilding and this arbitrary, oh, man, we'll get there and we're young. Well, you're young because you chose to be young. I see a lot of your players playing in the league that are veterans. So, I don't even want to hear that, from that standpoint, like I said. And what that does, if you're not careful, it gives you a license to basically be able to excuse anything that you do. At the end of the day, you go on and you go from there. But it's really a shame because we did hand it to them. I mean, and they didn't deserve it. They played good early, but they didn't deserve it. We made a tremendous comeback, and basically we handed it to them. And the reason that I say, I've heard people say that it was gift wrapped. I'll say it's gift wrapped, not just because we gave them the ball on the 43, but then the next play on defense is I have no idea what we're doing. Well, I know exactly what we're doing, but it's absolutely ridiculous call when you got Hopkins, who's in the top 5 receivers in the league, and you play him in some kind of quarter zone and expect your linebacker to play him all over underneath, and he goes for 20 yards. That gift-wrapped it because that put it in the field goal range. So, it is what it is, but you put them within one play to win it.
So, Rick Venturi, you got to hear this every Monday, and I hope you're hearing it right now on FM 107.5 and 1070 The Fan. Rick's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Frank said after the game, and I'm kind of in between on this, much like you are. You have really good points as far as why you wouldn't when you play in a league. The bottom line is wins and losses, no matter what we're talking about. Do you think that because of where they have been slotted by themselves, and now people like me will regurgitate that, hey, this is rebuilding and you don't expect too much. Was that a luxury call? Because Frank said yesterday that he would do that 10 out of 10 times. And for the life of me, if this team were 3-1 and battling within the AFC South this early, I can't imagine he does that against the Texans as he did with the way this team looks right now.
I have a hard time. That's a really good question. We talked about this, and I've thought about it all day. I have a hard time a coach not doing everything possible and making what he thinks in his heart is the best decision. So I'm not gonna comment and say that maybe was in his mind at that time. But I do think when you have made and created an atmosphere of rebuilding, and this year in some respects doesn't matter. I do think that thinking permeates basically everything you do in that respect. That's a good question, John. I'm not sure. I think it does excuse. I mean, I've heard people say, well, it's a learning experience. Well, you got a defensive line that's 28, 29, 31, and 27. I mean, I don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, I thought about that. Listen, Rick, I think you agree with me on this. I'm all for aggression. I am.
Oh yeah.
But that one yesterday seems to be overly aggressive, but a luxury that you have because, Frank, everybody likes Frank right now. And I'm not suggesting nobody likes him. I like him too, but that's kind of a luxury he has that, again, down the road you're not going to have. You're just simply not.
John, I know where you're going, and I misinterpreted your question. I think the response today, and I know, I'll get a lot of blowback because I'm not going along with the maddening crowd today, but basically, the response today is exactly a reaction to what you're saying. They basically have a pass this year. If that was Chuck Pagano, they'd be running him out on a rail. And I think you said this earlier. If it was Nate and he did something like that with the Pacers, they'd be running him out on a rail. So maybe at some point in time that doesn't matter. But I agree with you in that context. And as far as 10 for 10, well, the percentages of being successful in that situation are about 11 to 12%. So the chances are if you did it 10 out of 10 times, you'd lose 9 out of 10.
All right, here's where we disagree. And Rick Venturi joins us. Here's where we disagree. I asked this a little bit earlier, and you and I kind of knocked this around this morning. I said, if you're going to be aggressive, and everybody loves aggression, why not be, especially overly aggressive, which I think we can all agree that's what that was yesterday. If you're going to do that, why not do it on 4th and 2 when it's tied and you're in overtime and you can go for the win right there? I mean, seemingly go for the jugular right there instead of bringing Adam out and kicking that field goal and then playing defense. Why not do that? Or as you mentioned, why not go? Why not? Yeah. I mean, I know that it's nonsensical, but I mean, you got to keep in mind that I think that play that would make every bit of sense to me as going for it as Frank did on that 4th and 4 yesterday after calling a timeout and trying to draw him off sides.
Well, I think two things there, and that we do have a disagreement on that, because if you have the ball first and you go down and kick the field goal, you got the advantage now. And if your defense can stop them and you kick off to them, I mean, they're taking over at the 20. I mean, and they've got to drive on you to get that field goal. They have to drive the ball. It's a hell of a lot different than giving them the ball and say you got one first down and you win. And so I don't totally agree with you there, scoring first. I understand the comparison you're making. It is a little different in my mind.
Yeah, and I know. I think, and maybe it's just not me, I compare in that situation of going for it and being aggressive, I compare that to every bit of that 4th and 4 on the final play when you know that if you give that up, you got 24 seconds, you got a red-hot wide receiver, and it's not going to take very much, as it didn't take very much, to get the yardage necessary to win that game right there.
And he wasn't just red-hot. We didn't defend him all day. Yeah. He had 169 yards. I mean, it's like we didn't look at any tape. I mean, he is one of the top guys in the league. He's running clean most of the day. I mean, what's that all about?
So Rick Venturi with us on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. All right, we've talked about that. Here's the one thing that I know we absolutely agree on that I love seeing is I thought Andrew Luck was more like the Andrew Luck that we all recognize from the first 3 years of this Colts team being the quarterback than we have seen in a long time. And this was obviously dealing with the multitude of injuries he had dealt with. I thought that we saw, not just with the stats, but with the thinking, with the reactions. I thought that if there was a time when he was close to being his old self from the first 3 years, I thought yesterday, Rick, was it.
Well, I don't think there's any question about it. I thought that was one of his signature games. I thought that I tell you what it was reminiscent to me of. It was reminiscent of the divisional round Kansas City game in the 2014 season when he led us back in that miraculous comeback, and he did a little bit of everything to get going. What was impressive, I think, and what picked it and took it up a notch And finally, we did attack them on the outside. And I've been saying for 2 weeks, the last two defenses that we play, if you can't beat them on the outside, you're not going to beat them. And, they undress their corners. Hilton's always been good. And Joseph, who is their best corner, just for some reason, he can't play Hilton. It's amazing. He'll play good in other games. But the two throws to start the second half, and it did so much to get us back in the game. The deep one to Hilton was an absolute, what do they call it, a dime in there. Yeah. And then the wheel route up in there to the kid 21, Hines, to get up in there and to get that score was vintage. And as you say, he made a lot of throws. I mean, the guy threw 62 balls without an interception, completed 40. And again, very good escape, smart escape, made plays, threw it on a run. The only thing I'll say is the last play of the game, I would have just loved him. I understand throwing it low because that's where you throw it, but I would have liked to have seen him zip it on the outside. I don't know if we'd have come up with it because he was smothered. But, I would like to have seen him throw that one hard, but it's pretty hard to, you're not even close if it's not for him.
Rick Venturi's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Here's the thing that told me that he's close to being completely back. And that was in the first half, there were a couple of times, maybe even into the third quarter, if I recollect, where he could have taken off. And we saw a couple of times in Philly where he could have done the same thing and possibly run for the first down and extended the drive when he didn't do it. And he threw it.
Well,
we saw in the fourth quarter yesterday, he did it. And I think that what he said after the game, Rick, about, hey, I'm getting – everything is feeling – it's fast. It's slowing down to me right now. It feels comfortable. And he's talking about decision-making. And when he took off and ran a couple of times in the fourth and then that overtime, I loved it. And I think that to me rings true of him being back more than anything else.
Well, when you think about 466 yards or wherever it was that he threw for with that cast of characters that he's playing with, that's a credit to Frank, and that's a credit to him because that's a cast of characters now on offense that's not very good. That is a tremendous accomplishment to get 34 points. He's 4 for 4 in the red zone. He's 40 out of 62 balls without an interception, without a turnover. I mean, I think you'll take that every week.
Yeah, I would agree too.
I think before you put it on him, you really need to go through a checklist before you get to that one.
Well, I know, and there's no doubt. And again, the way we look at it, I mean, the difference between winning and losing still rides on his shoulders as much as it ever has.
Well, it really does, to the point that, he's being criticized for the last throw, and I myself did it to some degree, not as harsh as other people today, but he's still, and what it says is if he throws it 62 times, he better be right 62 times. And, he's got to throw into some windows now. We don't, once Hilton is out of there, and I will give Ebron some credit. He is making some plays in the red zone, like we had hoped he did, like I predicted he would. But, you go looking around there, what we have, and I'm not going to take anything away from them. They played hard, but we have a team, full of slots. Rodgers should be a slot. He'd be pretty damn good slot, really, if you could just leave him in the slot. Grant should be a slot. Pascal should be a slot. But when you put him on the outside, to win on the outside, to be able to beat tough coverage, you just don't ever see it. And that's what that final game, that final play, in some respects, was symptomatic of what our issues are on this football team offensively.
Rick Venturi's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. We got a lot to get to. I tell you what, I'm going to take a break right here and have you think about a couple of things. One would be, is there any way that they're going to be able to run the ball? Robert Turbin comes back. He's not going to be overutilized, certainly on Thursday. We'll see how that happens. But is there any way they're going to be able to run the football? We've seen the last 2 weeks where, hey, you know what, you can't run it, so you just kind of give up on running it. Is there anything they can do to run the football? And I do want to talk about their defense, and then down the road we'll get to that matchup with New England. It looks like Gronkowski is going to be available. And I want to get your thought on how Josh Gordon has been implemented. He played for the first time yesterday against Miami. And by the way, New England looked as legit as New England normally does against the Dolphins yesterday. I don't think there's any question about that. So we'll talk about that with Rick coming up on the other side. It is the segment you have to hear each and every Monday after 5 o'clock with Rick Venturi, live from the JMV golf outing to benefit Teachers Treasures. It's FM 107.5 at 1070 The Fan. Back to the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline, and Rick Venturi rejoins us. All right, running game. Is there anything that's going to help? Because clearly in the last 2 games, they've just said, you know what, we can't run it. Screw it, we won't.
Yeah, and then, we got behind, what was it? We got behind 28 to 10 or 27 to 10 or whatever. And the second half became, just a 7-on-7 drill. And we were so effective, why not do it? I mean, I've never, the running game is important, but if you can score 34 points and throw for 466, you really ought to win that game. I've never cared about numbers. It hasn't been very good, and the reason it hasn't been very good is after the early part of the season, we have had a really tough time getting up to what I call the second level. We'll do okay with a double team on a defensive lineman, but we never get up. And those linebackers are just running free in there. They're shooting through there. This happened. I thought we would fix it after a week, and I understood it a little bit versus Philadelphia because I knew how good the Philadelphia down linemen were. But, I thought we could run it against Texans. I just don't, just don't think – I think they're great with those 2 guys on the edges, but I think they're just adequate other places, and we just haven't been able to do it. Now, you've got to be able to do it. The Patriots, and we'll get into the Patriots later, but they're 27th against the rush. Now, they had a great game yesterday, but if you watch them like I have every game, the 2 weeks previous to that, they weren't worth a damn on defense. I mean, they couldn't slow anybody down. So, this is not the monsters of the Midway on defense. Don't get taken back by that one game because they struggled terribly against Detroit. They struggled terribly against Jacksonville. I mean, they got ran out of the park, really. So, basically you can run it. There's certain ways you can run it. I think against his team right now, I think they're more vulnerable when they're in the nickel defense. If you get them in nickel, if you get them in 3 wide receivers and get them to put their nickel in there, they get a little smaller. They don't tend to get off blocks as well. They tend to rush the passer on the edge, and teams have really hurt them in the bubble. Because basically they'll play an over front and there'll be a bubble to the weak side, and people have really hurt them with direct runs in there. And I think that's really important because you must keep the run going against Bill. Otherwise, he will get into specialized coverages that will stop you. And one of the things that keeps him out of there is a running game when he has to play more honest. So it's really important, I believe, this weekend. I think you can get on the edge, too. I mean, this is, when you start looking at their front 7, you have to point out the great players to me. I go into to get ready for a team, and I have a template before I start of guys that I feel like I'm probably going to highlight or schemes that I'm going to highlight. And I'll be honest with you, it took me 3 games to get enough on them. I'm just going to be honest with you.
So Rick Venturi, he's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. All right, what did you think about the way the offensive line played overall, and certainly the tackle positions?
I thought, and I think I texted you this or Dan or whoever. I thought basically the way we started the game is we looked like last year. I mean, we were throwing a lot of longer developing passes. And we were, early in the game. I mean, I was amazed at the one-on-one that we were allowing with Watt and Clowney going in, knowing that those 2 guys are wreckers, and they were just wrecking us. I think you said to me in the first quarter, "This kid's not going to make it to the half alive," and I think that was a question in mind. But as the game went on, we started to do a lot more nudging and chipping and slowing those guys down. And for a long period, and then I thought Romeo got, thank God. I mean, he played right into our hands. He started rushing 3. He started playing soft zone with that lead. It's like he went into prevent with like 2 quarters to go. And we just started ripping them and shredding them on different things, wide open inside. And their rush slowed down, honestly. And basically those two guys wore out. JJ really, he was gassed. Now I will give Clowney credit. I will.
Yeah, Clowney stayed after. Clowney was a difference maker, Rick,
because he was tired as hell. But when it was on the table in that last series, in some respects, he don't get enough credit for this win because he threw us for a loss, and then he went down and he threw our number 1 draft pick franchise player down like he was a child on that sack. I mean, he came around on that Tex game, and he took Nelson and threw him on his back, and we got into that. What was it? It was a 3rd and 21, and that was all Clowney. It was all responsibility of Clowney. Now we picked it back up with that check down and got back into that 4th and 4. But he did reach back. But I thought that our tackles actually, after that early part of the game, and then with some help, they started to hang in there. And maybe I'm giving them, maybe I'm not giving them enough credit. I just felt like Houston was gassed in the secondary and in the, they just looked like they were disorganized at times. They weren't lining up. Hell, they didn't line up on the touchdown to Ebron, and that wasn't the first time that happened the whole series. But, I thought those kids battled as it went on. They battled pretty well. They battled great in that 2-minute drill where we go down and score and then make the 2-point. I thought they did a terrific job there. But we're not blocking the run very well. Like I said, we're blocking the line of scrimmage, but we're never getting up to the linebacker. So there's just a lot of linebackers in our face all day. But that's got to change. And New England is not a team that you can't run it on. You have to be able to run it here.
Have you looked at their tape yet from yesterday? And if so, what do you think about Josh Gordon?
Okay, yeah. Of course I've looked at it. Here's what they are. Okay, Gordon is there. Gordon, they threw 2 outs to him on the outside. The reason that they've got Gordon is also the reason they have Dorsett. And actually, Dorsett is the guy they're starting to use more and more, and he looked damn good yesterday. He made a great diving catch. I didn't even know if he was capable of that. But what they are, and I could get into it and nuance it, but when you play Bill, you're basically looking at 2 types of offense. He basically runs 2 types of offense, and he runs them within every game, and the point of emphasis is based on where your weaknesses are and what you're the weakest against. Okay, one of them is what I call his hammer shot. And that's where the new kid, Michelle, is playing. That's when they get into regular personnel or 2 tight ends, and they pound you like they did to us in 214. And the changeup is to take the shots. And that's what they want, a speed guy like Dorsett. They want a speed guy like Gordon that you're talking about. I don't think Gordon is totally ready, but Dorsett is. They've taken a lot of shots to him off that weak side. And then they give you what is their bread and butter, which I call the open triangle. Now, in the open triangle, basically it's a spread. It's sometimes White's in the backfield, sometimes he's not. But it's really built. It revolves around 3 guys: Gronkowski, and you're going to get the debut of Edelman. That's been Hogan with Edelman out, but Edelman will be back. And White. It's those 3 guys, and they're the money players. And Gronkowski is tremendous. If we continue to not have plans for guys, then we have no excuse for not stopping them. And you got to pack it in. So what Bill needs and what teams are doing, the more and more they've seen him over the years, and it's cost him some in some playoff games, is teams are packing the inside on those 3 guys. They're making sure that they've got a lot of defense, and they're forcing him to throw that ball outside. And so he's never, since he gave up Randy Moss, he hasn't had that guy. So basically what he's got Dorsett for and what he's got Gordon for is to be that guy on the outside that when you get one-on-one coverage, when you get stripped of one-on-one coverage, that he can take his shot to those guys. The other guy, the 3rd guy, is Cordarrelle Patterson. I'm going to refer to those when I do my show as others. I never even included them before, but they've been brought in for a purpose so that if you're taking away those good guys. I'll tell you what, though. At the end of the day, you got to take away those good guys or you have no chance.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Rick Venturi's on the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. I got to ask you this. There are some things you look at the season so far, and we're through 4 games, Rick, where you say, hey, you know what? This guy's playing well. This guy's playing unlike I thought. And we thought about that with the defense too. How much of that might get wiped away considering we're talking about 3 games here that could have easily been won, because it just seems like they don't have anybody as of yet besides the quarterback, or at least the quarterback doesn't have any help at closing the door. And again, he's been an issue too. There's been no doubt he wasn't on Sunday, but they just don't seem like they have any late playmakers that are able to close the door. How much of that is factual of what I just said?
I think it's very factual, and that's why I think in some ways I take my hat off tremendously to both Frank and to Andrew. I mean, they're doing it without, a lot of skilled guys. I mean, basically you're talking Ryan Grant, you're talking, you're talking, 80. I'm losing sight of my guy right
Chester
there.
Rogers.
Chester Rogers. I mean, now Ty, they did a really good job of getting the ball to Ty. They got him over the top. But after Ty, then who do you worry about? There's guys, they can catch balls in the scheme. If you get zones, they'll catch balls there in open cracks. There's no question about that. But there's nobody creating any offense. The only guy that creates offense in the red zone is the big guy, is Ebron, because of his length and because you can throw him that fade, and he's had 3 touchdowns basically in the red zone. So that's real. But in terms of anybody else actually beating you or making you worry, and that's what you get concerned about with Belichick, because to beat Belichick, you have to think like Belichick. And that what Bills has 2 theories in terms of how he's going to. The first thing, he's going to make you play left-handed. He is going to give you what you don't do very well, and he's going to take away what you do. Now, Hilton looks to me like he'd be doubtful. I hope not. I hope he's ready to go. But, they've managed to take Hilton out of the game every time we've played him. He is not going to let Hilton beat you. If Hilton isn't there, he'll probably play a little bit more straight up. And then, he'll find a matchup for Ebron. If Rowe's ready to go, I bet it'll be Rowe. You kind of have to know. And then he'll try to get Flowers, who's his best rusher, lined up on our worst pass protector, whichever tackle or guard. He might even put him on Slauson. Flowers is the best guy he has up front. And so, he'll match those guys up. So you got to be ready to beat them left-handed. And then, on the other side of the ball, he's going to scratch where it itches. He's going to attack your personnel, and he's going to attack your scheme. And so, you got to be ready. In some respects, when you play him, you have to understand the principles of him. You have to know that going in. It's almost more important to know yourself. I used to tell young coaches when we get ready to play him, because I had worked for him, is that, if you don't know what your weaknesses are going into the game, he'll let you know in the first 10 minutes. So, you got to be ready for that. And then I think psychologically the other big thing is that you got to go up there and, don't get tied up with the myth of New England and, play the man, not the myth. They're not that good a team. They had a great game Sunday. They had 2 clunkers before that, just absolute clunkers. Are they probably going to go on a roll now? Probably, because that's kind of the nature. But, don't get all hung up on that. Look at their roster man to man and just go up and play them. Go up and do your thing.
All right, Rick, quick break and we'll come back. The level of importance, I'm not talking about guys that were injured in the game, but the guys that have been out, the Macs, the Castonzos, the Doyles. I want to ask you on the other side, think about this. Who's been the biggest missing piece to this point? Just a thought, because we're talking about guys that may not be back coming up on Thursday, but could be back by the Jets game. Yeah. We'll do that and close it out, Rick, on the other side, okay?
Yeah.
Rick Venturi, hang tight. Segment you got to hear every Monday, FM 107.5, 1070 The Fan. Back to the Andy Moore Automotive Group hotline. Hey, how big has the loss been of Jack Doyle? Can we make the argument that with the guys that have been missing over the past couple of games, that Jack being missing has been the biggest?
I would say the biggest is Castonzo, and I think that LaRaven Clark has hung in there a little bit, but when the money's on the table, you're still helping him. You're throwing the ball quick. Your left tackle position is your most, it's one of the big 3 on the whole football team, and basically I think that I think that's number one. I think Doyle is number two. I think Doyle hurts us because not so much in the passing game, although he is he's a very reliable guy inside, which we could use. But we really have no edge blockers. It's almost like we have to put another lineman in there, which I would be thinking about doing. So it's very hard for us to run the power on the edge because we don't, we're basically playing with all these hybrids, which are, almost basketball players, really.
Yeah, I think about Jack for just because of the multi-purpose. But, I mean, you're right with Castonzo. I mean, that's where it all starts on the left side.
We've forgotten about that, but what you don't factor in, and this is where you got to give Frank and Andrew some credit, is we've had to adapt everything without the left tackle. You always kind of in the back of your mind, unless you're a special team like the Eagles, you have to protect your right tackle to some degree. But usually your left tackle is your cement, is your guy that you can count on. And like I said, I think LaRaven has played better than expectations. Actually, I think he's battled his butt off. But it's again, now you're in context with that right tackle, left tackle. All of a sudden, after the first quarter, you got to change your whole passing game.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think about the tight end position too, because there was late in the game, Ebron kind of came up with an injury, and he motioned for a substitute come in. Allie Cox came in and immediately got a holding call.
Immediately got a holding call. Exactly. And, he's not a blocker, and the guy was a basketball player. I mean, and he's got to block Clowney on the backside, and he tackles him. I mean, it's just, and you'd like to see Ebron be able to finish it. Come on. Now, he did come back in the overtime, but, I mean, God, those critical situations, you got to got guys in there. But, again, we just continue to have so many injuries. I mean, it's really amazing.
It is. Hey, final thing before I let you go here, Rick. Give me a couple of good things that you have seen through 4 weeks, even with a 1-3 start. And there's nothing good about a 1-3 start, but some of the good things you have seen that could equate to even better things further down the road.
Well, I think two things stand out on three things, and they weren't that bad. We don't give up a lot of points. I mean, in a sense, you have to take 14 points off the score, or at least 10. I mean, we turned the ball over for 7, which was ridiculous by Kelly, and then we have the strip fumble, which again they come over the right tackle. Andrew didn't even see him. I mean, people are saying Andrew turned it over. You don't even see him, and Watt comes and strips the ball. So that's 14 points. We haven't given up a lot of points. We've been playing pretty well in the red zone, not as good yesterday, but we've been playing pretty well. And we've gotten a lot more pressure than any of us anticipated. We've gotten to the quarterback more. Now, I didn't think, even though the sacks look great, I still think we let him out there and let him have, because he's a guy. Sometimes you don't even want as many sacks. You just don't want him running around making plays like he does. I mean, so I mean that's an issue. I think our run defense is not very good, and we have not ever come up with a plan. I mean, I just thought it was horrendous to go into that game, and I said that all last week, to not have a really specific plan for Hopkins. That's just crazy. I thought yesterday, and we know that the young kid has played well, although he struggled yesterday, Leonard. He struggled in that critical situation. They asked him to do something you shouldn't ask him to do. I thought Desir, again, is playing very, very good. I thought Autry showed us a lot yesterday. That was kind of his first time back. And I thought Walker played really good. I thought those three guys played really exceptionally well. And, again, we've just gotten a lot more pressure up front than we thought. So that's a highlight going forward. And that could be big in the Patriot game. On offense, I thought, the quarterback, again, played exceptionally well yesterday. Hilton, he came back and played. He's a Texan killer. Ebron is giving us those plays in the red zone. And the kid that's given us a weapon, really, who we expected, and then it looked like he was going to stall in the preseason, but the kid that's come on really good is Hines. I mean, Hines is doing what we had hoped he would do. He is that joker. He can play in the slot. He can come out of the backfield. He can run it good enough to give you some open field runs. So, if you have Hilton and Ebron and Hines, those are decent weapons. I do think Chester Rogers is a good slot. I think if you play him outside the numbers and try to win with him out there, like happened in that critical play, you're kidding yourself. But in the slot, I really think he's pretty good. It's just a shame, really, that we didn't go out and really get a big-time outside-the-numbers receiver. I mean, we're paying for that stubbornness right now.
Yeah, and a lot of people are talking about that too. I don't know, Rick, I don't know if Ballard's ever – like people talk about, go after Le'Veon Bell and do that. Ballard just doesn't appear to be that type of guy.
Probably not going to do that one, but there was a lot of guys that were younger. Yeah. I mean, if you can be stubborn, but you are accountable in this league for your record at some point.
Yep. Hey, Rick, great job as always, my friend. Refreshing in the 5 o'clock hour to hear your take, regardless of who believes it and who doesn't believe it or who doesn't agree with it. It is great stuff as always, my friend. Thank you.
Have a good day, John.